"You don't belong in those seats, sweetheart," the clerk sneered, her voice a serrated blade cutting through the humid air of the courtroom anteroom. She didn't even look up from her fingernails, painted a chipped, violent shade of crimson. "The defendant holding area is down the hall, past the vending machines. And tuck that shirt in. You look like you just rolled out of a gutter." Amara froze, her hand hovering over the mahogany railing. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and electric. Around them, paralegals and attorneys in three-piece suits paused, eyes darting between the older white woman behind the glass and the black woman in the tracksuit standing before it. Amara didn't shout. She didn't recoil. She simply smiled, a cold, terrifying expression that didn't reach her eyes, and checked her watch. "I suggest you enjoy that coffee, Ms. Pringle," Amara said softly. "It's going to be a very long morning." The humidity in New Orleans was not merely a weather condition. It was a physical weight, a wet blanket that clung to the skin and made the air inside the Orleans Parish Civil District Court feel thick, despite the industrial air conditioning. It was 8:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, 45 minutes before the docket call, and the courthouse hummed with the nervous energy of people whose lives were about to change, mostly for the worse. Amara Vance pushed through the heavy double doors of the clerk's office, wiping a bead of sweat from her temple. She was not dressed for court. At least, not in the traditional sense. She wore a charcoal gray, moisture-wicking tracksuit, expensive running shoes that had seen better days, and a New York Yankees cap pulled low over her braids. She had spent the last hour on a 5-mile run through City Park, clearing her head, preparing for the mental marathon that awaited her. She had intended to slip into her chambers through the private judge's entrance, but the keycard reader had malfunctioned. A recurring issue in a building that was equal parts historic grandeur and municipal neglect. She needed the physical file for Case 24902, The City versus Marcus Thorne. The digital system was down again, and she wanted to review the evidence logs before taking the bench. Amara approached the glass partition. The nameplate on the other side read, "Dolores Dolly Pringle, Senior Clerk." Dolly Pringle was a fixture of the parish. She was a woman of indeterminate age, somewhere between 50 and ancient, with hair dyed a brittle blonde and teased into a helmet that defied gravity. She sat perched on her ergonomic chair like a gargoyle guarding a cathedral, her desk cluttered with porcelain cat figurines, and a lukewarm cup of coffee from Café du Monde. Amara waited. She knew the game. She had been a lawyer in this city for 15 years before her appointment. She knew that for women like Dolly Pringle, power wasn't about money. It was about time. Specifically, making other people waste theirs. "Excuse me," Amara said, her voice polite, measured. Dolly slowly licked sugar from a beignet off her thumb. She turned a page of a tabloid magazine, her eyes scanning a headline about a celebrity divorce. She did not look up. "Excuse me," Amara repeated, slightly louder. Dolly sighed, a long, rattling exhalation of pure annoyance. She slowly lowered the magazine and peered over her reading glasses. Her eyes were watery and pale, but the malice in them was sharp. She looked Amara up and down, taking in the tracksuit, the sweat, the lack of a visible attorney badge. "Public defender's office is on the second floor, but they ain't gonna see you without an appointment," Dolly said, her accent thick with the drawl of the deep, old South. "And if you're here to pay a traffic fine, the kiosk is in the lobby. Though looking at those shoes, I doubt you're doing much driving." Amara felt the heat rise in her chest, a familiar fire she had learned to dampen with ice-cold professionalism years ago. "I'm not here for a fine, Ms. Pringle. I need to pull a file. Case 24902. Dolly laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound. It was a dry, hacking cackle that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "You need to pull a file?" "You?" She shook her head, amused. Honey, files are for attorneys and court officers, not for public observers. We have strict privacy laws. I can't just hand over sensitive documents to every Jane Doe who wanders in off the street looking for her baby daddy's record. The assumption hung in the air, gross and heavy. I am not looking for a baby daddy, Amara said, her voice dropping an octave. I am asking for a file that is relevant to this morning's docket. It is imperative that I see it immediately. Dolly leaned forward, her face pressing close to the glass. Listen to me, and listen good because I'm only going to say this once. I run this office. I have been running this office since before you were born. I know every lawyer in this parish, and I don't know you. So, unless you have a bar card or a court order, you need to turn your little tail around and walk out. I don't have my card on me, Amara admitted. It was in her purse, which was currently locked in her chambers, inaccessible due to the faulty keycard reader. However, if you check your system, systems down, Dolly lied smoothly. Amara could see the reflection of the active database on the glass behind Dolly's head. And I ain't checking nothing for you. Now move along. You're blocking the line for the professionals. Behind Amara, a young white attorney in a seersucker suit cleared his throat. He looked fresh out of Tulane law, nervous and eager. Go ahead, Mr. Abernathy, Dolly cooed, her demeanor shifting instantly from viper to grandmother. What can I get for you, sugar? Amara didn't move. She planted her feet. I am not finished. Dolly's eyes narrowed into slits. Oh, you're finished. You're finished when I say you're finished. Do I need to call Deputy Miller? Because I will. I'll have him drag you out for creating a disturbance. God knows you people think you can just loud talk your way into getting what you want. You people. The words echoed off the marble floors. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The young attorney, Mr. Abernathy, looked down at his shoes, his face flushing red, but he said nothing. He didn't intervene. He didn't correct her. He just waited for his turn. Amara looked at Dolly. She really looked at her. She saw the bitterness etched into the lines around Dolly's mouth. She saw the fear masking itself as arrogance. She saw a woman who had a tiny ounce of authority and used it to crush anyone she deemed lesser. Call him, Amara said. Call Deputy Miller. Dolly blinked. She hadn't expected that. Usually the threat of law enforcement was enough to send the indigent and the intimidated scurrying. You think I'm bluffing? I think, Amara said, leaning in so close her breath fogged the glass, that you are making a mistake that you will spend the rest of your career regretting. I think you are judging a book by a cover you don't understand, and I think you should hand me file 24902. Dolly slammed her hand onto the desk, rattling the porcelain cats. That is it! Miller, get in here! Miller, get in! Deputy Miller was a good man, tired and overworked, with a waistline that strained against his utility belt and a pension he was counting the days toward. He lumbered into the clerk's office, a half-eaten bagel in one hand. What's the ruckus, Dolly? He asked, mouth full. She's harassing me, Earl. Dolly pointed a manicured finger at Amara like a loaded weapon. Refuses to leave, demanding confidential files, threatening me. I want her removed. I want her trespassed from the building. Miller turned to Amara. He sighed, wiping crumbs from his lip. He didn't recognize her immediately. Amara had only been appointed to the Civil District Court 3 weeks ago, transferring from a federal post in D.C. She hadn't officially met the security detail on the first floor yet, and without her robes, without the makeup and the suit, she looked entirely different. Ma'am, Miller said, his tone weary but not unkind. You can't be back here causing trouble. Miss Dolly has a job to do. I have a job to do as well, Deputy, Amara said calmly. I am merely trying to access a file. She's a lie, Dolly shrieked. She's probably one of the defendant's girlfriends trying to tamper with evidence. Look at her. Does she look like an officer of the court to you?" Miller looked at Amara. He saw the sweat, the baseball cap, the defiance. He hesitated. He had been a cop for 30 years. He knew the look of trouble, but he also knew the look of authority. And the woman standing before him, despite the tracksuit, held herself with the posture of a queen. "Ma'am, do you have ID?" Miller asked. "It is in my office," Amara said. "Upstairs. If you would simply escort me." "She's trying to sneak upstairs," Dolly interrupted, standing up now. "I told you, she's casing the place. Get her out, Earl, or I'm writing you up too." Miller grimaced. He didn't like Dolly. Nobody liked Dolly. But Dolly had the ear of the chief judge. Dolly managed the payroll processing. Dolly could make his life a living hell. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside," Miller said, reaching for Amara's elbow. "You can come back when you have your ID." Amara stepped back, evading his touch. "I am not leaving this building." "Don't make me cuff you," Miller warned, his hand drifting toward his belt. The atmosphere in the room shifted from awkward to dangerous. The paralegals stopped whispering. The silence was absolute. Amara looked at Miller, then passed him to Dolly. Dolly was smiling, a smug, victorious smile. She had won. She had asserted her dominance over the uppity black woman who dared to speak to her as an equal. "Fine," Amara said. She raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. "I will go to the waiting area, but I am not leaving." "Waiting area is for defendants and family only," Dolly spat. "Lawyers wait in the bar lounge." "Then I'll fit right in, won't I?" Amara said dryly. She turned and walked out of the office, but she didn't leave the building. She walked to the benches outside courtroom 4, her courtroom. She sat down between a weeping mother clutching a toddler and an old man in a frayed suit clutching a Bible. She watched. For the next 20 minutes, Amara Vance, the honorable judge of the Civil District Court, became invisible. She watched as Dolly Pringle exited her office to pin a notice on the bulletin board. She watched as Dolly berated a young Hispanic man for asking where the restroom was, pretending not to understand his accent even though his English was perfect. She watched as Dolly flirted with a senior partner from a major firm, giggling like a schoolgirl, while he made inappropriate jokes about his secretary. Amara absorbed it all. She felt the texture of the injustice here. It wasn't just the big rulings, it was the microaggressions, the procedural violence inflicted by the gatekeepers. Dolly Pringle wasn't just a rude clerk. She was a cancer in the lymphatic system of the court. She clogged the flow of justice based on her own prejudices. Amara looked at the clock on the wall. 8:55 a.m. The bailiff for courtroom 4, a woman named Sarah who did know Amara, unlocked the double doors. "All rise!" Sarah's voice boomed into the hallway. The crowd stirred. The weeping mother stood up. The old man kissed his Bible. Dolly Pringle waddled out of her office, clutching a stack of files. She was the clerk of court for this session. She had to be present to record the rulings. She saw Amara still sitting on the bench. "I thought I told you to leave," Dolly hissed, stopping in front of her. "Deputy Miller, she's still here!" Miller was down the hall, looking conflicted. Amara stood up. She towered over Dolly. She took off her Yankees cap, letting her long braids fall loose. She unzipped her tracksuit jacket. Underneath, she wasn't wearing a t-shirt. She was wearing a simple black camisole, but that wasn't what caught Dolly's eye. "It is time for court, Ms. Pringle," Amara said. "You wouldn't want to be late." "You're crazy," Dolly muttered, clutching her files tighter. "You're actually crazy. I'm going to have the judge throw you in a cell for contempt." "I look forward to it," Amara said. Amara walked past her, not toward the public entrance, but toward the side door marked Judges and Staff Only. "Hey!" Dolly shouted, waddling after her. "Hey, you can't go in there! That's a restricted area! Stop her!" Amara pushed the door open. Sarah, the bailiff, looked up, startled. When she saw Amara, her eyes widened. She snapped to attention. "Good morning, Judge Vance," Sarah said clearly, her voice ringing out. Dolly froze in the doorway. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if her vocal cords had been severed. "Judge Vance?" Amara didn't look back. "Good morning, Sarah. I'll need 5 minutes to robe up. And Sarah, please tell the clerk to have file 24-902 ready on my bench. I believe she had trouble finding it earlier." The door swung shut, leaving Dolly Pringle standing in the hallway, the blood draining from her face so fast she looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. The robing room was a sanctuary of oak and leather, smelling of lemon polish and old books. Amara's hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She moved quickly. She stripped off the tracksuit pants and the jacket. From her locker, she pulled her spare blouse and skirt. She always kept a backup. Then she reached for the robe. It was heavy, black silk. When she put it on, she felt the transformation. It was armor. It was history. It was the weight of the state of Louisiana draped across her shoulders. She zipped it up, the sound sharp in the quiet room. She looked in the mirror. The woman in the tracksuit was gone. The woman looking back was the law. She took a deep breath. Compassion, she told herself. Fairness, but today, accountability. She opened the door to the courtroom. "All rise. The Civil District Court for the Parish of Orleans is now in session. The Honorable Judge Amara Vance presiding." Sarah's voice was louder this time, laced with a terrified urgency. The courtroom shuffled to its feet. Lawyers buttoned jackets. Defendants swallowed hard. And there, sitting at the clerk's desk below the judge's bench, was Dolly Pringle. Dolly was trembling, visibly. Her hands were shaking so badly she had dropped her pen. She was staring at the empty, high-backed chair, praying, pleading with a God she likely hadn't spoken to in years that this was a mistake. Maybe there were 2 Judge Vances. Maybe the woman in the tracksuit was the judge's sister. Then Amara ascended the steps. She moved with a grace that was almost predatory. She stepped up to the bench, the high platform that placed her 6 feet above everyone else. She arranged her notepad. She adjusted the microphone. Then she looked down, directly at Dolly. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Dolly looked up. Her eyes met Amara's. In that moment, the power dynamic of the universe shifted on its axis. The woman Dolly had sneered at, the woman she had called sweetheart, the woman she had assumed was an illiterate criminal, was now holding the gavel that could end her career. Dolly's face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated horror. Her makeup, once an armor, now looked like clown paint. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to vomit, but nothing came out. Amara held her gaze for a long, uncomfortable 10 seconds. She let Dolly sit in the stew of her own bigotry. She let the realization sink in. I am not just your boss. I am your judge. Good morning, Amara said into the microphone. Her voice boomed, amplified, filling every corner of the room. It was the voice of God. Good morning, Your Honor, the attorneys chorused. Madam Clerk, Amara said, turning her head slightly to the left, looking down at the top of Dolly's teased hair. Are we ready to proceed? Dolly scrambled to stand up. She knocked over her cup of water. It splashed across the desk, soaking the very files she had protected so viciously earlier. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was a squeak. And the file? Amara asked. Case 24902, the one I requested earlier? Dolly's hands fumbled with the wet papers. I have it right here, Your Honor, right here. She held it up, her hand shaking so much the papers rustled audibly. Bring it to me, Amara commanded. Dolly had to walk the walk of shame. She had to come out from behind her desk, waddle across the open floor in front of the packed gallery, past the weeping mother, past the old man, past the smirking young lawyers, and climb the steps to the bench. She reached up, handing the folder to Amara. Amara took it. Their fingers brushed. Dolly flinched as if burned. Thank you, Ms. Pringle, Amara said, her voice dropping so only Dolly could hear. I noticed the system is back up. It's amazing what a change of clothes can fix, isn't it? Dolly turned scarlet. She couldn't breathe. Your Honor, I didn't know. I swear. Sit down, Amara said, her voice returning to full volume. We have a lot of work to do, and Ms. Pringle, ensure the record reflects exactly what happens in this courtroom today. I will be watching closely. Amara opened the file. But she wasn't reading it. She was looking at the first case on the docket. Call the first case, Amara ordered. Dolly picked up the docket sheet. She tried to read, but her glasses had slid down her sweaty nose. State of Louisiana versus Marcus Thorne. Mr. Thorne, Amara said, looking at the young black man standing nervously at the defense table. He looked terrified. He looked like he expected the system to chew him up and spit him out. Amara looked at the prosecutor. Counsel, I've reviewed the preliminary notes. This is a simple possession charge, is it not? Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor said. And yet, Amara said, tapping a fingernail on the desk, I see here that the defendant has been held for 3 weeks because his paperwork for a bail reduction was misplaced. Amara's eyes snapped back to Dolly. Dolly shrank into her chair. Misplaced, Amara repeated. Ms. Pringle, would you happen to know anything about misplaced paperwork for defendants who look like Mr. Thorne? The trap was sprung. It wasn't just about the insult in the lobby anymore. Amara had realized something on that bench outside. Dolly wasn't just rude. She was dangerous. She was burying cases. She was slowing down justice for the poor and speeding it up for the rich. We have a backlog, Your Honor, Dolly stammered. A backlog, Amara mused. Interesting. Because you had plenty of time to read a magazine this morning, and plenty of time to threaten me with arrest. Amara leaned forward. Mr. Thorne, you are released on your own recognizance effective immediately. Clerk, process the release papers. Now. But the paperwork, Dolly whispered. If he is not walking out of that door in 10 minutes, Amara said, her voice turning to steel, I will hold you in contempt of court, and unlike the waiting room, Ms. Pringle, the holding cells down there, they don't have air conditioning. Dolly typed. She typed like her life depended on it. Amara sat back. She looked out at the gallery. She saw Deputy Miller in the back, looking pale. He gave her a small, respectful nod. He knew. The power had shifted. The old guard was dead. But Amara knew this was just the beginning. Dolly Pringle was a symptom of a rot that went deep into the floorboards of this courthouse. And Amara Vance had brought a sledgehammer. The victory in Courtroom 4 was intoxicating, but Amara Vance was a federal creature by nature. She knew that when you cut off a lizard's tail, it grows back. Dolly Pringle was merely the tail. Amara needed to find the head. For the next 2 weeks, Amara played the role of the diligent, slightly overwhelmed new judge. She cleared her docket efficiently, treated the staff with professional courtesy, and ignored the venomous whispers that trailed her whenever she walked past the clerk's office. But every evening, when the cleaning crews arrived and the attorneys went home to their suburbs, Amara went downstairs. Way downstairs. The archives of the Orleans Parish Civil District Court were located in the sub-basement, a place that city engineers had likely forgotten existed. It was a labyrinth of metal shelving units that smelled of wet cardboard, dust, and time. It was here, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, that Amara found the pattern. She was looking for a specific series of eviction cases from 2022, cases where tenants claimed they had never received notice of their court dates. According to the digital records, the notices had been sent. According to the tenants, they woke up to a sheriff's deputy banging on their door. "You won't find them in Section C," a voice croaked from the shadows. Amara spun around, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. Sitting at a small metal desk in the corner, surrounded by towers of yellowing paper, was an elderly black man. He wore a gray cardigan despite the heat and thick spectacles that magnified his eyes into owls. "Excuse me," Amara said, lowering the light. "Section C is for completed cases," the man said, standing up slowly. His joints popped audibly. "The files you're looking for, the problem files, they go to the dead zone." "Who are you?" "I'm Thomas," he said simply. "I've been the archivist here since 1985. I was supposed to retire 10 years ago, but they keep forgetting to process my pension papers. Or maybe they just like knowing I'm down here, keeping their secrets." Amara approached him. "Thomas, I'm Judge Vance." "I know who you are," Thomas chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "You're the one who made Dolly Pringle carry a file. News travels fast even down here. You said the dead zone?" Thomas beckoned her to follow. They walked deep into the stacks, past the organized rows, to a caged area in the far back near the sump pumps. The cage was locked with a heavy padlock. Inside, stacks of files were piled haphazardly, floor to ceiling. No organization, no labels, just a mountain of paper. "Dolly calls this pending review," Thomas whispered. "But nothing ever leaves this cage. These are the bail reductions that get lost, the domestic violence restraining orders that don't get signed in time, the eviction appeals that vanish." Amara shone her light through the wire mesh. She saw names, hundreds of them. "Why?" Amara asked. "Why do they do it?" "Money," Thomas said. "And favor. You see that red tab on the top of that stack? That's a landlord who donates to the judge's re-election fund. His tenants don't get notices. That blue stack? That's a DUI case for a city councilman's son. It's been pending review for 3 years." "How do you know all this?" Thomas tapped his temple. "I read. It's quiet down here. I read everything before they make me file it away. I tried to tell the chief judge once, back in '98. He told me if I liked my job, I'd learn to be illiterate." Amara gripped the wire mesh. This wasn't just negligence. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating under the guise of bureaucracy. "Thomas," Amara said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage, "do you have the key to this cage?" "No," Thomas shook his head. "Only 2 people have that key, Dolly Pringle, and the man she answers to." "Who?" Thomas looked up at the ceiling, toward the executive chambers on the top floor. "Judge Holloway, the presiding judge of the criminal division, the king of the parish. Judge Beauregard Beau Holloway was a man who looked like he had been carved out of a Confederate monument. He was large, silver-haired, and possessed a voice that sounded like bourbon poured over gravel. He didn't wear a robe. He wore bespoke suits that cost more than Amara's car. 3 days after meeting Thomas, Amara received a summons. Not an email, but a heavy cream-colored card on her desk. Lunch. Commander's Palace. 12:30. She knew she couldn't refuse. It was a summons from the king. The restaurant was a New Orleans institution, all teal walls and chandeliers, filled with the city's power players. Holloway was holding court at a corner table, a martini already in his hand. "Amara!" he boomed as she approached, standing up, a gesture of old-school chivalry that felt more like a threat assessment. "So glad you could join me. The turtle soup here is mandatory. Amara sat down, placing her napkin in her lap. Thank you for the invitation, Judge Holloway. Please, call me Beau. We're colleagues now. He smiled, but his eyes were flat and cold, like a shark's. I wanted to welcome you properly. I hear you've been making waves downstairs, shaking up poor Dolly. I merely insist on efficiency in my courtroom, Amara said smoothly. Efficiency is good, Holloway nodded, signaling the waiter. But disruptiveness, that's something else. You see, Amara, this courthouse is an ecosystem. It's a delicate balance. We have a way of doing things that has worked for 100 years. With all due respect, Beau, from what I've seen, the way of doing things involves violating the civil rights of about 40% of the docket. The air at the table chilled instantly. Holloway didn't blink. He took a slow sip of his martini. You're from D.C., aren't you? He asked softly. Federal background. You're used to black and white letters on a page. Down here, the law is fluid. We manage the population. We keep the streets safe. Sometimes, that means certain files take the scenic route. That sounds like obstruction of justice, Amara said. Holloway chuckled, but there was no humor in it. That sounds like a young judge who doesn't understand that her appointment is up for renewal in 2 years. You have a bright future, Amara. You're sharp. You're articulate. You could go to the appeals court, maybe even federal bench one day. He leaned in, the smell of gin and expensive cologne wafting across the table. Or, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, you could find yourself assigned to traffic court in New Orleans East, handling parking tickets for the next decade until you quit in frustration. And trust me, accidents happen. Files get lost. Personnel records get lost. Amara felt the threat hang in the air like a guillotine blade. He wasn't just threatening her job. He was telling her he owned the system. Is that how you control Dolly? Amara asked. Fear? Loyalty, Holloway corrected. Dolly knows who butters her bread. She knows that I protect my own. The question is, Amara, are you one of us? Or are you a tourist? Amara stood up. She hadn't touched her water. I'm not a tourist, Beau, she said, her voice loud enough that the neighboring table of lobbyists glanced over. And I'm not one of you. I'm a judge, and I think I'll skip the soup. I have a lot of reading to do. She walked out. She could feel Holloway's eyes boring into her back. When she got to her car in the parking garage, she saw the answer to her defiance. Her driver's side window was smashed. Her glove compartment was open, papers scattered everywhere. Nothing of value was taken. Her sunglasses were still there. But on the driver's seat, sitting on top of the shattered glass, was a single dead cockroach. A message. You are a pest, and you will be crushed. Amara drove home with the wind whipping through her broken window. She didn't go to the police. The police monitored the courthouse parking garage. If they hadn't stopped it, they were likely part of it. She needed an external variable. She pulled into her driveway, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She went inside, locked the deadbolt, and pulled a burner phone from her safe. She dialed a number she hadn't used in 3 years. It rang twice. Carter, a deep voice answered. It's Vance, Amara said. A pause. Amara, I thought you retired to the Big Easy to eat beignets and bang a gavel. I need you, Marcus. I need the Bureau. For what? Your civil court, that's state level. I have a conspiracy, Amara said, pacing her living room. A RICO case wrapped in a judicial robe, wire fraud, mail fraud, civil rights violations, and I think I have the head of the snake. Who? Beauregard Holloway. A low whistle on the other end. Holloway? He's untouchable. He plays golf with senators. If you come at him, you better not miss. I won't miss, Amara said, but I need resources. I can't trust the local PD. I can't trust the sheriff. I have a witness inside, an archivist. He showed me the stash. What stash? The dead zone. A cage full of suppressed evidence. But I can't get to it. And after our lunch today, Holloway knows I'm onto him. He's going to move. If he knows you know, Carter said, his voice snapping into professional mode. He won't just move. He'll purge. He'll destroy the evidence to cut the tie. Exactly, Amara said. That's why I need you down here. Now. I can be on the first flight out of Dulles tomorrow morning, Carter said. Meet me at that cafe on Poydras, the loud one. Hard to record audio there. Marcus, Amara hesitated. They smashed my car window today, inside the secure garage. Sit tight, Amara, Carter said softly. The cavalry is coming. The next morning, the atmosphere in the courthouse was brittle. Dolly Pringle wouldn't look at Amara. The clerks were whispering. At 10 a.m., Thomas the archivist intercepted Amara in the hallway, near the vending machines. He was pushing a mail cart, looking terrified. He pretended to drop a stack of envelopes. Amara knelt to help him. They're moving tonight, Thomas whispered, not looking at her. I heard Holloway on the phone with Dolly. He told her the audit is coming early. He told her to fire up the furnace. Tonight? Amara whispered back. He said 9 p.m. After the cleaners leave, they're going to burn the dead zone. Amara stood up, handing him the envelopes. Go home, Thomas. Be sick. Leave early. Do not be here tonight. Be careful, Judge, Thomas said, his eyes pleading. Holloway carries a gun. Amara watched him shuffle away. She checked her watch. It was 11 a.m. Carter was landing in an hour. She had the time, she had the motive. And now, thanks to Thomas, she had the smoking gun. Or rather, the burning one. She walked back to her chambers, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She sat at her desk and drafted a single text message to the burner number. The timeline has moved up. Tonight is the night. She grabbed her purse and headed for the side exit to meet Carter. It was time to go hunting. The cafe on Poydras Street was noisy, filled with the lunchtime rush of paralegals and tourists, providing the perfect acoustic cover. Amara sat in a back booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. Across from her, Special Agent Marcus Carter studied the screen of Amara's phone. He swiped through the photos of the eviction notices, the suppressed evidence motions, the domestic violence petition sitting in the trash bins. His face, usually an impassive mask of federal stoicism, was tightening with anger. This is systematic, Carter said, his voice low. This isn't just one clerk being lazy. This is a RICO case. They're running a criminal enterprise from inside the clerk's office. Holloway ordered the destruction of the files tonight, Amara said. He told Dolly to burn them. If we wait for a grand jury, the evidence will be ash by morning. Carter nodded. He tapped the table. We can't get a warrant for the whole building in 2 hours. Judges are skittish about raiding other judges, but if we have probable cause that evidence is being destroyed right now, we can move under exigent circumstances. How do we prove it's happening right now? Amara asked. Carter reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, flat device. You proved it exists. Now you need to prove they are destroying it. We need a witness inside the room. Amara looked at the device. A wire. If I go back in there tonight, Amara said, and they catch me? We'll be listening, Carter promised. We'll have a tactical team in the parking garage. The moment you give the signal, or if we hear anything that sounds like a threat, we breach. But Amara, you have to get them to say it. You need Holloway or Pringle to admit that they are destroying these specific files to hide their crimes. Amara took the device. Dolly keeps the loading dock key on a hook in her office. That's where the industrial shredders are. The incinerator is in the sub-basement. They'll go for the incinerator, Carter said. It's faster, less paper trail. Amara stood up. She felt a cold knot in her stomach, but beneath it, the burning steel of conviction. I'll see you on the other side, Agent. The courthouse at night was a different beast. Without the crowds, it was a hollowed-out carcass of marble and shadow. Amara badged in at the side entrance at 9:20 p.m. The security guard, one of Dolly's nephews, was nowhere to be seen, likely paid to take a long smoke break. Amara moved silently through the halls. She wore the wire taped to her chest beneath a loose hoodie. She wasn't Judge Vance now. She was a ghost. She heard the noise before she saw the light, the rumble of the freight elevator. She took the stairs down to the sub-basement, past the archives where she had met Thomas. The air got hotter the lower she went. The smell of mildew was replaced by the acrid, biting scent of burning paper. She reached the heavy iron door of the boiler room. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the scene was almost medieval. The old furnace, usually reserved for winter, was roaring. Dolly Pringle was there, sweating through her blouse, her hair a deflated mess. She was shoveling handfuls of files into the open maw of the fire. Judge Holloway stood nearby, drinking from a silver flask, watching the history of the poor turn into smoke. "Faster, Darlene," Holloway barked. "The janitorial crew comes on at 10. "My arms are tired, Beau," Dolly whined, tossing a thick folder into the flames. Amara recognized the red tab. It was a child custody case. "Why can't we just shred them?" "Shreds can be puzzled back together," Holloway said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Ash tells no tales. We have to clear the backlog before the commission investigators arrive on Monday. If they find these, we go to jail. If they find nothing, the girl looks like a paranoid liar." Amara stepped into the light. "The girl is right here, Beau." Dolly screamed and dropped the shovel. Holloway spun around, his flask slipping from his fingers and clattering onto the floor. "You!" Holloway snarled. His face, illuminated by the firelight, looked demonic. "You have a death wish, don't you?" "I have a wish for justice," Amara said, her voice steady, broadcasting clearly to the van parked 3 stories above them. "You're destroying federal evidence, Judge. Obstruction of justice. Conspiracy." "I am cleaning up a clerical error," Holloway roared, stepping toward her. He was big, and in the flickering light, he looked dangerous. "Who are you to question me? I have been the law in this parish for 30 years. "You aren't the law," Amara said, holding her ground. "You're a criminal, and you, Dolly, you're destroying the lives of people who trusted you. That file you just burned, was that a mother trying to get her kids back? Was it a man trying to prove his innocence?" "It was trash!" Dolly shrieked, her eyes manic. "They're all trash, clogging up my docket, making me work late. They don't matter." "They matter to me," Amara said softly. Holloway lunged. He wasn't reaching for a file. He was reaching for Amara. "You aren't leaving this room." "Now!" Amara shouted. The metal doors at the top of the ramp burst open with a deafening boom. Flashbangs detonated, filling the room with blinding white light and a ringing concussive force. "Federal agents! Drop it! Get on the ground!" A swarm of FBI agents in tactical gear poured into the room like a black tide. Red laser sights cut through the smoke, dancing on Holloway's chest and Dolly's forehead. Dolly shrieked, throwing her hands up and falling to her knees. "Don't shoot! It was him! He made me do it! He's the judge! I just follow orders!" Holloway stood frozen, his hand halfway outstretched toward Amara. He looked at the agents, then at Amara. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving behind a frail, terrified old man. Agent Carter stepped forward, his gun drawn but lowered. "Beauregard Holloway, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of rights under color of law." Carter turned to Dolly, who was sobbing into the dirty concrete floor. "Dolores Pringle, you have the right to remain silent, though I highly suggest you start talking." As they handcuffed Holloway, he looked at Amara one last time. "You've destroyed the court," he spat. Amara adjusted her hoodie. No, Bo, I just took out the trash. The fallout was nuclear. The story didn't just make the local news, it made the New York Times. "The Purge in the Parish," the headline read. The video of Dolly Pringle shoveling files into a furnace, captured by Amara's wire, which had video capability, was played on loop on CNN. The cleanup took months. The FBI seized the entire basement. Thomas, the old archivist, was deputized to lead a team of forensic accountants and paralegals to reconstruct the destroyed cases. They found thousands of lost files. But the true climax came 3 months later. Amara sat on the bench in courtroom 4. The air conditioning was working. She had made sure of that. The docket was full, but it was moving efficiently. "Next case," Amara called out. The side door opened. A prisoner was let in, wearing the orange jumpsuit of the Orleans Parish Justice Center. It was Dolly Pringle. She looked small. The hairspray helmet was gone, replaced by limp gray roots. Her makeup was absent, revealing the deep lines of bitterness etched into her face. She was shackled at the wrists and ankles. She wasn't there for trial. That would be in federal court. She was there for a preliminary hearing on a separate state charge regarding the theft of court funds. Dolly looked up at the bench. She saw Amara in the black robes. The courtroom was silent. The regulars were there, Sarah the bailiff, Deputy Miller. They watched with a grim satisfaction. "State your name for the record," Amara said. "Dolly, Dolores Pringle," she whispered. "I can't hear you," Amara said. She didn't shout. She didn't sneer. She simply required clarity. "Dolores Pringle," Dolly said, her voice cracking. "Ms. Pringle, you are charged with embezzlement of public funds," Amara said, reading from the file. "Your attorney has requested a bail reduction, citing your standing in the community." Amara looked over her glasses. "However," Amara continued, "I have reviewed your file. It seems you have a history of flight risk behavior, specifically attempting to destroy evidence to flee prosecution." I have medical conditions," Dolly stammered. "The jail, it's too hot. The food is terrible. Please, Judge, I worked here for 40 years. "Yes," Amara said, "you did. And in those 40 years, how many people did you send to that same jail with a laugh? How many medical conditions did you ignore because you wanted to read a magazine?" Dolly looked down at her shackles. She was crying, but nobody moved to comfort her. "Bail is denied," Amara ruled, slamming the gavel. "You will be remanded to the custody of the sheriff until your federal trial begins." "And Miss Pringle?" Dolly looked up, eyes swimming with tears. "The public defender's office is on the 2nd floor," Amara said, echoing Dolly's words from that first day. "But they are very busy. You might have to wait." "Next case," 6 months later. The humidity had broken, giving way to a crisp October breeze. Amara walked up the steps of the Civil District Court. She didn't use the back entrance anymore. She liked walking through the front doors. She stopped at the security checkpoint. "Morning, Judge Vance," the new guard said with a genuine smile. "Morning, David," she replied. She walked past the clerk's office. The glass partition was clean. The Dolly Pringle nameplate was gone, replaced by a simple sign. "Information desk. All are welcome." Behind the glass, a young woman, competent, fast, and polite, was helping an elderly man fill out a form. "Take your time, sir," the young clerk was saying. "We can figure this out together." Amara smiled. She walked up the marble stairs to courtroom 4. She entered her chambers and put on her robe. It felt lighter now. The weight of the injustice had been lifted, replaced by the responsibility of maintenance. She walked out to the bench. The bailiff called out, "All rise!" In the back row, she saw a familiar face. It was Marcus Thorne, the young man from her first day, the one Dolly had tried to bury. He was wearing a suit. He gave her a shy wave. He was free. He was working. He was living his life because the system had finally worked for him. Amara sat down. She adjusted her microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces. Black, white, brown, rich, poor. They were all looking at her, waiting for judgment. She picked up the gavel. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a tool. "Good morning," Judge Amara Vance said. "Let's get to work."